I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Village Board and the Planning and Zoning Commission for the workshop on Wednesday, July 23rd, 2014 at 7 o'clock p.m. I'll ask Clerk Simsky if she could please call the roll for the Village Board.
Mayor Gunther.
Here.
The clerk's here. Trustee Addington.
Here.
Trustee Barker.
Here.
Trustee Barry.
Here.
Trustee Nero.
Here.
Trustee Scott.
Here.
Trustee Seneca. Here.
And I would likewise ask the clerk to call the roll of the Plan Commission.
Okay. Chairman Richards.
Here.
Commissioner Anton. Commissioner Fidesco.
Here.
Commissioner Fleet.
Here.
Commissioner Pill.
Here.
Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
And Commissioner Van Buren.
Here.
You've got the staff that's here? And
I've got the staff.
I'd ask everybody if they please rise and join me in the Pledge of
Oh, I'm
Allegiance.
sorry, we do have Attorney Zemanek here.
Attorney Zemanek is
Don't
here.
forget Wildstaff.
Wow.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And again, tonight is a workshop meeting for the Village Board and the Planning and Zoning Commission. We do have an agenda. And the first item, I'd ask our attorney, John Zemanek, to provide us with a little Government 101, the roles of the Village Board and the Planning and Zoning, just to get us going.
All right, thanks, Mayor. Hi, everyone. I won't do a zoning 101 talking about rezonings and variances and things like that, but limit it to kind of the development process. And I think everyone's pretty familiar with the process. But when an applicant comes in, they'll see staff, which is Jill, who will walk them through the application process, tell them what they need to bring in, guide them through whether variances, special uses, rezonings, et cetera, are necessary. And once we have an application, or sometimes even before that, it will go to the Economic Development Committee. And that committee is comprised of a mixture of elected officials, staff, and some business owners who are just kind of a sounding board, a first level of review for the village to basically look at a site plan, a business idea, and make some suggestions if needed to an applicant, and ultimately give a recommendation of a thumbs up or a thumbs down on a very preliminary basis. And sometimes at that point, the site plan's pretty rough, all the materials aren't in, so the EDC, while they do give a recommendation, sometimes they're a little handicapped in not having a full story in front of them because we're trying to move this along. It then goes back to the staff level where Jill will get whatever additional information is needed, advise them if a traffic study might be necessary, perhaps tweak their building design. And she'll also take the information and distribute it to Bob Fleck for landscaping review, if that's part of the project, to Kim, Nicole, and Steve for stormwater and engineering review, to fire for fire review, get their comments back, write up a nice write-up and send it off to the Planning and Zoning Commission, who conducts a public hearing. I think Jill does a great job of providing a very detailed analysis for planning and zoning and for the village board as to a development. And sometimes we'll give the pros and cons, such as this is a TIF district in our downtown. We're looking for sales tax generating uses. This use does not generate sales tax. But then she'll also say, and oftentimes talk about the positives of development. Some communities, I've seen staff will give stronger recommendations. Either staff is in favor of this or staff is not in favor of this. Why? The village doesn't do that at this point. That's something that's open for discussion tonight if you'd like a more assertive recommendation from staff. When a project then gets to planning and zoning, that's really the chance to drill down on the details of a development, hear what it's about. It's Planning and Zoning Commission's job to really look in depth at a site plan, the architectural detail. If we have all these beautiful buildings up on Ogden Avenue and someone comes in with a basic red brick box with no architectural detail, that's the Planning and Zoning Commission's job to say, hey, this is not in character with the area, and you have the right to send them back and come back at a later meeting with improvements to the design of their building. The same is true with landscaping. If the landscaping's not up to what you feel is necessary for an area, you can recommend that they bulk up landscaping. When planning and zoning reviews something also, they have to keep in mind the goals and purposes of the comp plan, and that addresses everything from what the signage should look like to what kind of uses you want in an area and the quality and character of development. That's something that, is a document that's prepared and sometimes gets put away. But now that it's, again, a fresh document for the village, where a lot of time, effort, and money was put into that study, it really should be, I think, moved more to the forefront and given perhaps a more adequate consideration. And I think it's staff's job as well to say this fits in with the goals of the comp plan or doesn't fit in with the goals of the comp plan. The public hearing process, of course, is also a chance for the public to speak. And we've had a bit of a problem with some recent applications where no one has shown up for what could be some controversial developments, or very few people have shown up, and they've decided, instead of coming to the Planning and Zoning Commission, to bombard the village board with comments and show up at village board meetings. I don't know why that's happening. We spoke with the mayor. We are complying and then some with the state statute requirements as far as publishing in the newspaper, mailing notice to surrounding property owners within 250 feet, posting a sign on the property, and having the agendas available in multiple locations. Yet still sometimes we're not getting the turnout at Planning and Zoning that perhaps would help Planning and Zoning Commission make a more informed decision. So that's something else that's open for discussion if you think there's something further we can do as far as getting notice out there, whether it's a bigger sign, as Steve May possibly suggested, expanding the area for which notice is mailed, which again is a little bit more of a burden and cost on developers. And in thinking about things like that, you always do have to burden the efficiency that you want these projects to move through the review process and the cost involved to a developer, because I think the village probably would like to be seen as a developer-friendly community versus making sure the public's aware of our project and their voices are heard. I think the planning and, from what we all have witnessed, the Planning and Zoning Commission does a great job of visiting the property, reviewing the materials that staff provides, asking many, many detailed questions, and trying to make a recommendation that they think's in the best of the village. And then once they recommend, it comes up to the village board, who has the ultimate decision-making authority. The village board has the ability, if there's new evidence presented, or if they feel like more details are needed, or if there's a public outcry about something, to refer a matter back to Planning and Zoning for further public hearings. It's kind of important, particularly if public shows up and that they're not under oath when they're speaking in front of the village board. They are at the public hearing process. And I think, the courts kind of look at the public hearing as somewhat sacred because people are under oath. So that's one option for the board. I think Jill's going to talk about.
Yeah, we'll move on. I think the intent tonight, unfortunately, as you know, there's 4 of us that just recently got on board a little over a year ago. Only one of the 4 has prior experience, and I thought it was a great opportunity to have this workshop just for the interaction, just to discuss and maybe highlight some of the areas that we want to discuss. And I think Jill is going to start with the comprehensive plan discussion. And again, this is stop, ask questions. This whole intent of this is to make it a workshop.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to start with the 63rd and Cass sub-area of the comprehensive plan. This is a significant corridor due to its visibility and potential for redevelopment. The main northwest corner at 63rd and Cass was rezoned specifically for commercial 7 years ago, and some of Westmont's largest parcels could over time be transformed into high-quality retail, sales tax generating businesses. This would be in addition to, rather than competing with the Ogden Avenue corridor, and it would have its own unique character anchored by Mariano's. The comp plan recommends that the Village approved developments that lead toward the long-term vision of this corridor. This includes ensuring high-quality architecture, landscaping, and signage, which Attorney Zemanek mentioned earlier. This would reflect the corridor goals and create a vibrant commercial area. To this end, while we have not had new buildings recently, we have had new tenants move in, and we've encouraged monument signs and landscaping to gradually improve the appearance of the corridor. Some of the questions and discussion points that could come up, specifically with regard to 63rd and Cass, is how rigid the village wants to be with requiring retail in the C1 and TIF area. There are vacancies and blighted buildings, and service or office uses may request special uses to fill these buildings. When we meet with potential tenants, we want to give direct, clear advice. And now may be a good time to open up this area for feedback and discussion.
Good time for Mr. Addington to start us off.
Why? I'm a North Sider.
Jill, in the C1, do we have, I know we have, and I didn't think to bring it for the different zoning areas, but do we have a list here tonight of the approved uses and what might be a special use?
Yes, I can go over, I don't have every list, but they're mostly retail. As you know, the TIF boundaries were reduced from the south side of 63rd Street, so they go up and up to 60th Street, across 61st, and over to Williams. Most of this area is C1, except for the Anchor Rock, B2 shopping center north of 61st, and then the M district at 61st and Van Industrial. We've seen some recent new tenants move in there, and then the B2 district at the corner.
So the C1
Is commercial, retail, and offices. Offices are permitted in B2, but they are required to get special uses in C1.
but specifically the C1, there, I mean, do we have a list of what would be considered a special use? I know in the
Yes.
B1, there's some things that won't even be considered as a special use.
Correct. So offices would be considered a special use, and those are listed. Things that are
Hair
different.
salons, things like that.
Right, salons, service uses, but things like schools, which are permitted with a special use in B2, are not permitted at all at C1. And so we've had some questions about that.
So it's in the zoning ordinance, there's the list, just like with the other zoning districts, list of permitted and special uses in the zoning ordinance. I'm looking at it right now, and really the vast majority, I shouldn't even say vast majority, the super majority of the uses allowed are retail, that are allowed by right. Anything that's not retail, for the most part, like a printing shop, for example, would be a special use. Yeah, so.
John, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe just prior to it becoming a TIF, perhaps 2 years ago or so, we reanalyzed all of those, and we repositioned many of them to bring it up into sort of current times, if you will, taking certain things out, businesses that don't really apply anymore, and bringing in newer types of businesses and things like that to the list. And I think that list is very similar. I don't mean similar in content, but the way it's listed is similar for each of the districts, as you pointed out.
Correct. And I think
So
that's a
I
good.
think we're fairly updated on it.
Yeah, but I think that's still a good task to do every couple of years. Take a look at your use lists and see, the economy is always changing. There are also new types of businesses popping up every couple of years that become trendy. Microbrews was something that both boards recently addressed. And then there could be, future things like that. So I'd recommend that.
I don't mean to speak for the rest of the commissioners, but as I look at that area, what always, I don't want to say confuses me, let's say provides the biggest challenge, is the idea that we have this large two shopping centers. The second one, the more north one, is virtually vacant, and the south one has some areas of vacancy. They have done some work now recently to get a few new tenants in there. We have this beautiful area that we hope is going to come to fruition and be completely developed with Mariano's. And then we have these 3 lots that really don't fit in with UPS, AT&T, and the school bus area. And, as you look at that whole block, because that's really the heart and soul of it right there, you could take a little bank property and extricate that, but what do you really do with that? but that's a big area. That's a huge, huge area. And I don't know that there's anything, I feel like that we're sort of locked into what we got there. You know, we're not going to go ahead and start condemning properties and taking properties that way. So are we left with that? Because I don't know how we develop the other areas. It's always easier to develop that big area first, I think, but I don't see how we can do anything with it.
I've got some thoughts. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, you'll recall that we've actually approached those businesses and, you know, actually talked to them about potentially relocating, and maybe we could help them find a spot. And at least with AT&T, they, you know, the last time, they never even bothered to answer us.
Right, I'm
So-
aware of, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
And
so-
the landlords of the, or the owners of both of the mall properties have been not very easy to budge either.
Sometimes as an area gets redeveloped and property values go up and the properties become more sought after, developers start knocking on the door and making offers that's hard for some of these businesses to refuse. And that's what you're hoping for, along with the village constantly encouraging these businesses to not only relocate for the better of the village, but also to offer assistance to find other property, whether it's in Westmont or elsewhere.
I guess, you know, in a way, I'm sort of saying this, in my own personal, as I view these things, and I was involved in writing the comprehensive plan, and I took that task very seriously. So I look at the comprehensive plan. I mean, I have one and I have it marked up, and I look at it from time to time as it applies, but then there become exceptions. And I guess that's where hopefully we'll get some guidance and how hard and firm do we want to be and things like that. And I know at some point we'll get up to Ogden Avenue and this whole veterinary thing, and to me, that was a type of an exception to the comprehensive plan that is supported by parts of it. But this one down here, it's just so huge, so massive, that area, and I just don't find any of those 5 major tenants willing to budge an inch.
Well, I agree somewhat with what you're saying, Greg, because the school bus has become very difficult to relocate and still be in the area.
Sure.
You know, there's not that much open green space where you can say, we'll trade you.
For
you know,
1,000 buses.
You know, ideally, we'd relocate it to where the ponds are located. You know, that would be the grand scheme, and have the school buses there and, you know, hopefully improve that area. But again, until, as John said, until we get a huge player that's willing to do that, I see those school buses remaining on 63rd Street, unfortunately.
Concerning the school buses, it's only a rumor, but my neighbor drives for the school buses. They have recently, I think it's 58 or something, lost the contract, Downers. They changed the contract, and the school bus company picked them up. And ostensibly, they're supposed to be looking to relocate because they've got to increase their fleet. Now, rumor, innuendo, I don't know, but that's what my neighbor told me.
There, we had an opportunity, were you at the meeting, Steve and Larry? They're busting at the seams, and Larry might be able to comment. We had a meeting with them a couple weeks ago.
We did meet with First Student, and they did pick up a new contract, so they are looking at additional space. Some of the space that they're looking at is right behind Westbrook Shopping Center. They're also looking at the possibility, instead of finding more space for buses, finding more space for their employees. So in other words, their employees would be parked off-site and then shuttled back to the facility where the buses are.
They got a better chance for pigs to fly before they get any more commercial land. Plain and simple.
That's a good point. But to all three of those properties, the TIF district is driving activity on 63rd Street. There are meetings going on with developers, and as time goes on, there will be development opportunities. I believe it's going to take some time for those properties to evolve. But at a certain point, their value will be such that developers will be making offers to buy those parcels. I truly believe that.
And I think the bus company did say their lease is up next year. Then Greg, you know, they don't own that.
I didn't.
Parts. They do not own it. So as that value grows, the person who owns it may want to sell it. So that's at least a positive from our standpoint.
Is there any way we could institute a truck vehicle tax sticker? No? Why not?
Because we're a non-home rule community, so I don't know
Ooh.
quite how we
Ouch.
just license trucks.
Okay,
Yeah, the municipal code doesn't allow you to do that.
that's a shame.
It's your home rule.
If we remember to the village stickers, though, that was the best part of the village stickers was the school buses, because they would always do them. They were one of the few fleets that would really always do them, and that was one of the few positives on the village stickers.
Maybe I misunderstood your question, but you're talking about requiring a sticker or registration for all commercial vehicles
Correct.
that operate that basically park
That
within?
reside in the village.
That's possible. We can look into that.
That's a good idea.
If they're gonna occupy our C1 area, why not at least get something out of it?
But that, again, it's going to apply across the board, so it's not just for the school buses. It's going to apply to uses
Sorry,
in
Mr. Perry.
Ogden, the M District, and, there's always some public backlash when you impose new taxes or new fees, so.
Understand.
One of the other considerations is, the economy is slowly turning. You got a Mariano's coming in there. At one point, like, for example, in the downtown, and I think we'll get to that, the Flossie was kind of, all right, this is not a sales tax generating use, but it fills a vacant store, and that's a benefit, and it attracts shoppers to the area, so let's approve it. And the same may be true in that C1 district, and I think collectively there should be some discussion about, you've got a new TIF district, the economy's improving, how strict do you want to be about really promoting positive sales tax type generating uses or ones that are synergistic with that?
If you're talking strictly, say like the C1 district, if you strictly want to raise revenue, sales tax revenue by selling stuff, I believe that you have to have a mix, albeit small, but where you offer services for people where they can go get a haircut maybe, a beauty shop.
The laundromat on 63rd and Cass is a prime example of that.
It's always busy.
It's busy. That brings people to the mall. That gets some shopping.
So you've got to be able to
Well,
offer.
at least get some shopping
But
to the one
right.
grocery store that's
Right.
there right now. But
Right, yeah.
So you've got to be able to offer services for people, not just stores that sell them stuff.
I think there's an overall consensus. I know I talked to Larry, and I'll let Larry explain it.
Well, to that point, the comp plan does provide us latitude to blend in, retail and services and restaurant. The question is always going to be what's the highest and best use of a piece of property? And I don't think we'll ever find any part, or should we find any part of our village without a blend of those. So I truly believe in that. And I think part of the discussion I'm hoping tonight is that we walk away with a shared vision of what that is and how we interpret the comprehensive plan and how we look at it when making these type of decisions. Because it starts from the very beginning when I meet with a prospective business to economic development committee to planning and zoning to the village board. And we want to have that vision from that very first step to when we cut the ribbon. So.
Any additional comments? Should we have Joe move to the next? Might be you go through all the areas and we end up then
Sure.
starting with the discussions.
Okay. Next, we'll talk about the Ogden Avenue corridor, which Greg Toll just alluded to. We've seen a lot of recent redevelopment and interest in vacant or underperforming properties on Ogden Avenue. The Auto Mile is an important area that does not have a lot of room for growth, so available properties are highly desirable if they can offer additional room for showcasing vehicles or providing parking. Larry and I have met with a lot of dealers recently with our economic development team and talking specifically about their needs for expansions, providing additional parking for both their employees and for visitors. Some of the smaller parcels are recommended by the comprehensive plan for assemblage to make them more useful. Because of this recommendation, it makes a long-term vision very important because there's a lot of pressure from the development community to fill, lease, and sell properties that have been vacant for some time. This is kind of a recurring theme. A recent example, as Greg mentioned, was the Hinsdale Westmont Animal Hospital. This is a recent redevelopment proposal that received a lot of attention, partially because it was a service use that needed a special use on a retail corridor. After a lot of public input at the village board meeting, the proposal was denied, which was an opposite vote from the Planning and Zoning Commission and followed a nearly split Economic Development Committee vote. Are there any thoughts regarding Ogden Avenue in general or that site in particular? We can open that up.
On the animal hospital one, the main opposition to that, I think the doctor was just outside of the limits of having received it. I talked to him right after we had our meeting, and he wasn't aware of it until after it had been. So then he got all his guns together to come to the village board. At least this is the way I see it. So the mayor's suggestion of expanding, or maybe it was John's suggestion, expanding the area of influence, or of, that will be notified on any of this, to make sure that they're aware of it, because I think that's what happened there. I don't think it's necessarily a sign of things to come, although having seen what happened, I would think about if I were bringing something here.
Well, I would like to offer several comments on this. First, it's been my contention for a long time that 250-foot boundary is way too small. It should be looked at to be increased to 1,000 feet, is my opinion. Secondly, I believe that there should be a change in the way that process works. Recently, in the last year, I had an opportunity to come before you with a change in zoning. And what I found out was that I was tasked with the job of going down into Downers Grove to the, I don't know if it's the recorder's office or what it is.
Township assessor.
Township assessor. And so I sort of stand there at the front counter not knowing what to do, and then somebody wanders out, and then they give me a book and a ruler, and I start measuring and I write stuff down. Then eventually I go in, I get to sit at a computer, 3 computers in a row broke, and blah, 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 blah. 2 hours later, I come out and I've written my envelopes. And, if I was going to go ahead and do something, and Jim was in one of the neighbors who I knew would be opposed to this, his might just fall into the garbage can or not get addressed. I think there should be a fee to do that, and we can get an intern. I hate to burden staff, but it's almost like asking the bank robber to go ahead and guard the safe. So I think the radius is way too small, and I think the way the system is set up is not a good system. So that's the first 2 points. Now, in this particular instance, I was visited the day before the second planning and zoning hearing by the doctor and his assistant. They spent 90 minutes somewhat grilling me, somewhat asking questions and things, and my philosophy is I will answer anything with honesty and integrity, and that's what I did. And I invited him to the meeting the next day, and I said, we are the hearing body, there'll be a public hearing. And he said, I'm not gonna bother with that. I am coming, I don't wanna tip my hand, I'm coming to the village board. I'm rounding up through the underground voters. And I laughed, I watched the replay of this. I was unable to be here that night. I watched the replay in its entirety, and I love the one person who came up, and their first line was, I'm a voter. And I said, okay, that's sheer intimidation. And whether that's something that's taken into consideration, I don't know. But as John pointed out, none of these people are under oath. So to call it new evidence, as someone just said, to me is weak. I also felt, after having watched that and having sat through an economic development meeting where we had to take a second-hand vote because it was the closest one ever, I believe separated by 1 vote, and then 2 planning and zoning hearings, I believe 75% of what was said that night at that podium was irrelevant or absolutely untrue. And I just think that's not what we want as a village. And I understand how the votes can follow something like that, but that's the point of having sworn oath and testimony. So his comment really rang true to me, and I'm not sure I have the solution to that, but we need to figure out a way, because I think smart people are going to go ahead and view this as a short circuit way to go ahead and get a favorable vote. And that's not what we want to do. First of all, I enjoy what I do at planning and zoning, and I take great pride in it. And it bothers me that whatever, 50 or 75 people came out here in opposition to this, but how I saw it happen is they were led here. And I can't imagine that many people have read the comprehensive plan. And I noticed how many people quoted the comprehensive plan, and I would have loved it if some trustees would have gone ahead and questioned them on it. Because it's real easy to say, I've studied the comprehensive plan, and this, that, and this. And if nobody calls them out on it, then it's viewed as the truth on TV and in a recording. Even though we know it's not under oath, but that was said at 7:01, and this is at whatever, 6:59 or 7:59 or something like that. Times being irrelevant there was more the example. So I think we need to increase the radius and the zone. I think we need to bring that in-house, and I think we need to determine a way, and I don't think the best way is to put them under oath at a village board hearing. That totally short-circuits the whole system, and now is going to double your meetings and make the Planning and Zoning Commission irrelevant. And if that's what you want, that's okay, but I don't think that's what anybody wants. And so we need to figure out a way where you can't do that. So if you are notified properly and you get plenty of time, and maybe that should be in the letter. This is your chance. This is your opportunity. You will be under oath. It will be sworn testimony. I place great value, particularly in hiring process and in my associations, and what I've tried to teach my children is that integrity and honesty are the two things you carry with you through your life. And when somebody gets up to that podium and bullshits me or tells an outright lie, that irritates me. I lose all respect at that point for that person. And I lost respect for a lot of people who said things. And I can tell you this, at that Tuesday meeting in my office, I wrote several things down. And I asked the first 3 of them on Wednesday night, and all 3 of them proved to be untrue. All 3 of them. And they were, for instance, the very first one I said, how many stories will your building be? 2. And does that include a basement? There'll be no basement. I said, is it slab construction? Yes. I was told all of his buildings have a basement and house an additional 250 animals that are slipped in after the special use is granted. That's not true. So there was a whole list of those things, and so I don't want to belabor that one point, because what I'm trying to say is, how do we stop that from happening? I don't think that was a good thing.
You know, I definitely agree with, expanding, 250 feet. I mean, that's a large backyard in the south part of town, so
How about an auto dealer
exactly.
who's got 3 acres? I mean, think about, he only touches a couple of people because they're so big.
But with regard to that meeting in particular and all of those people coming, I can honestly say, if there were 500 people, that did not influence me at all, and I don't think it influences most of this board. I'll give you the example of cell towers at the high school. We had hundreds of people in here against it from Oakwood, and we passed it. So, I mean, we're not easily influenced by loud talkers or people that come and, preface it with, I'm a voter,
No,
we hear that
but
all
you
the
don't want it
time.
that way. That's not
Half
the way we
people
want
that
it.
come don't even vote anyway.
Yeah, right.
But,
Excellent point.
yeah, I mean, really, so I mean, I don't know that that's entirely, I mean, I don't
I just felt it was
necessarily agree
staged.
with that.
Well, and Greg, it'll be staged again. I don't think you're ever going to stop somebody from staging something when they know they're going to be on TV. No reflection to the planning and zoning, but the buck stops here. So if you're going to make, nobody wants to make 2 appearances. They're going to go right where the answer is going to be and that vote's going to be. You get your most bang for the buck, because the most people are going to watch that meeting. Unfortunately, not planning and zoning as they should be, but it's going to happen here.
He made it clear to me that's the case. He said it right to my face.
Well, Greg, I was against it at the EDC level. I was one of those hands down. So my opinion didn't change. But I do agree with you that I think most of us, we had a pit in our stomach when we left that day, because it did seem like it was a loaded deck, and it was very unfair to the petitioner. And so, again, it was one of those bittersweet situations. But that did not change my opinion. I was against it at the EDC level and continued to be.
And whether we support something or that, we can agree to disagree. I could find ample evidence in the comprehensive plan to support that. And many people could find ample evidence to not support that plan. And so, that's neither here nor there. I just don't think that the burden should be placed on the Board of Trustees to have that at a meeting that is designed for other things when there is a vehicle in place to handle that. And I'm hoping that maybe a couple of minor changes, and I would welcome any comments from John on what you do with this testimony under oath kind of thing, where people can get up there and just say whatever they feel like. And again, once somebody hears it, it's like rumors. They get going, and all of a sudden, it's the fact, it's truth, and it's really not.
Could I make a suggestion? This is something that's rolling around in my head as I hear you speak. If we have, legal testimony at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we have open comments at the village board, why not, if you haven't given legal testimony at the Planning and Zoning Commission, you can't make a comment pertaining to that specific
There's one
issue.
possible
You can make
solution.
other comments pertaining to other issues on the board, on the board's agenda, but not that particular comment.
So we would force the people to have to go to the
They have
planning
to
and
go to
zoning
the planning
before
and
they.
zoning, or they can't make a comment.
What if you had a scheduling conflict then, and this was your only
Well, then in that
opportunity?
case, they do what many other people do in front of our board. They submit a letter, and it's entered into
Yeah,
testimony.
but that's not taken as real testimony, is it,
No.
a letter?
And one of the
It's not under
problems,
oath either.
and
No,
again,
but-
this goes back to a specific.
No, that's true.
One of the problems that we ran into, this becomes, in that case, that he said, she said type situation, was when the petitioner told us that a prior business he had purchased was going belly up, and then we get a letter from the previous owner of that business saying that's absolutely untrue. And you have no idea who's telling you the truth and who isn't. And none of that was under testimony, which is what you and I talked about after the fact, and it kind of, I kind of knocked myself in the head, say, yeah, maybe in that case, some of this should have been referred back to get some clarification on some of that, just because that was one of the areas that bothered me, is I didn't know who was telling me the truth and who wasn't. And when you're not sure and you get into those negative situations, how do most people vote? They say, let's just turn it down. Because then you can't, you don't go wrong by approving it, and if it's not there, it's not there. And so I think I learned something from it in talking to Greg afterwards because of the testimony thing. That's a tremendously powerful tool for us to not lose at that level.
I was flabbergasted because I have satellite, so I don't get the meetings. When I heard about it, I think Sue told me, yeah. And she told me, you folks here at the board level, you had all these people. They said, we saw no soul whatsoever at either of our two meetings. But that aside, what I looked at personally was, this was not a revenue generator per se, in a very minuscule way. But he was going to upgrade the property of that decrepit old hotel, which is nothing more than maybe an afternoon delight. And doesn't really bring us any money whatsoever. Now, this is an ongoing business from Hinsdale that he's looking to expand. His people come from Hinsdale, Burr Ridge, Oak Brook. These people have money. They've got money to spend. Here again, it goes back to what I believe. We have to offer services for convenience along with our retail establishments. We were going to put them right next door. He was going to go right next door to the pet supply place. Likewise, when these people with money are right across from the nice Ogden Avenue Shopping Center or our used car, our brand new car mile, maybe they want to buy a Porsche Maybe they want to buy an Audi, who knows? But that's what governed my thought process. We're bringing people into our shopping area with money. And I thought it was a pretty darn good fit myself.
I think the issue was there was too much of an unknown. I voted for it at the planning and
was
zoning.
What was unknown?
Well, the unknown is, we've been told by businesses in the past, this is what we plan to do. And we've also had the consequences of when that doesn't happen.
But Bob,
We have a neighborhood behind us, behind there, that has suffered, I can't tell you for how many years because of the car dealership.
okay, but
We've
Bob,
talked to them, we've asked about, when they first came in here, they told us 50 cars would, the most they would have on that lot. They wouldn't have any more than that. That's what we were told when that came into this town. Well, we know that's not true because they're doing very well. So the people up there can't park in front of their homes. It's difficult to have company over there. I understand they're public streets, but that area would be hard pressed for somebody to sell that house if a realtor came out there and couldn't park in front of that house to show it, and the people would see the cars up and down there. So that neighborhood has had issues because of the traffic that's there in the businesses.
okay, Bob, but you're saying this was testimony given before you. Testimony given to us, we nailed down just exactly what, we're going to go talk about the vet. Under sworn testimony.
But sworn testimony, what does it mean? Has anybody ever gone to jail for it? That's one question we have to
I'm
have.
saying, that's all we can do.
I understand it, but
What
what is?
can I do?
But you can do more, and you guys have done more, both at planning and zoning level and village board level, to address concerns like that. And some of it's a growing process and seeing a business make a representation and then find it not to be true. But, with the special use process in particular, you impose these special conditions, sometimes left and right, to restrict the impact. And, you should require a site plan that shows where their employees are going to park, make sure it's sufficient to accommodate all of their employees, restrict employee parking on the public streets as a special condition of a special use. And we've done that lately. And then have teeth in the ordinance that if there's, up to 3 violations and notice and they don't cure them, you could have a hearing to revoke the special use. So.
But Bob, we covered our basis at planning and zoning under sworn testimony as to what could be in there. I even had them as to the size of the animals, or to be no large animals whatsoever.
I asked about snow plowing, which somebody brought up, feces. We asked about parking and the amount of spots and stuff like that, and this buffer between the houses. I mean, no matter what you put back there, you're going to have a business that's going to butt up to residential. So you need to get a big fence and some kind of a buffer zone. And I think, from conversations that I've had, I was in the Porsche office when they declined to be interested in that property. And I happen to personally know the owners of the resale shop, and they're just not interested in selling. And I was when we did the plan, and I saw that was a perfect area to go ahead and bring properties together. And when Pet Supplies Plus came in, that was right before the plan was ratified, right in that area. And we talked about it a little bit, but, and this is maybe where we need direction, because it was my first time working with a document like this. Should we have denied Pet Supplies Plus and kept that thing open? I think this is really where the question, because it's the chicken and the egg. Once Pet Supplies Plus went in, once Porsche said no, once this place I know is not going to sell, I look at that as the best use, and it will bring people in. And the primary goal of this character district, which is what we call the Jewel and the 2 blocks across the street, is to strengthen the presence of the main shopping center. I think that's going to strengthen the main shopping center. Now, in addition, I feel that there is a problem on that street, and I think regardless of whether Porsche expands, we should take a look at cul-de-sacing that street. Yeah. And that would take away one of the last arguments. I thought the one guy who had the most smarts was the guy who came up there and said, if you pass this, you ought to do these 5 things. And I think there were several nods. He was pretty sharp. He had it in a nutshell. Put some teeth into it. If you could smell it at the fence, they get fined. If it gets above 60 decibels at the fence, they get fined. Whatever. I think those were some great ideas. Now, what do you do going back? And, we can't change Pet Supplies Plus anymore. So once that comes in there, that now breaks up that whole gas station to elite repeat section. So I don't know how else you do it.
Well, I think my concern there, to everyone's point, was its proximity to the residents and the 24 hours. Everything else was, those were my sticking points at EDC, and that's what I continued through. As a resident, I would not want a 24-hour dog hospital where barking dogs could be dropped off at 2 or 3 in the morning, and my house is right next to it. That was my thing. If it would have been on the other side of Ogden, at the old bank or something, I think I would have been for it, no matter how many people came.
Strange thing though is, Harold, the man who made the noise is penetrated more than anybody else into the residential district. Remember that when we went and we gave him, because everybody was complaining, all the neighbors were complaining when he moved from Ogden Avenue and he moved into the residential. This is the
Huge
man that now is
considerations
saying,
given.
look, pay attention to your plan.
But not 24 hours. You know, that was the thing, was the 24 hours there. We may get another business in there, but will it be a 24-hour business next to a residence?
Let's
That
say-
part was for me. But with all those other things, my personal and village stance is that we don't enforce these things down the road, and we can't. And I'm frustrated with a lot of this enforcement. You know, we see, you guys go through great measures to make sure parking lot's lit a certain amount. Well, as the years go by, guys hit poles, they take poles down. We never go back to make sure that those lights in that
Landscaping's a
parking
great
lot
one,
is
sure.
illuminated. So again, to put all these in there and say that we're gonna do it down the road, I can't see how we have the staff to do that at this point. You know, I hope we fix that. I really do, but I think that's a long walk for us at this point.
Parking lot landscaping.
There's another perfect
That's-
example.
That's my pet peeve.
Now, the other side of this is if Ogden is truly our commercial corridor, so let's say we have the return, the triumphant, I'll even say, return of White Castle to Westmont. And let's say they buy the motel and come in with a 24-hour and a drive-through. Now, they're gonna pay taxes. Are we gonna go ahead and look to approve that because it's a sales tax generating business? But yet it still falls under 24-hour. Maybe an extreme example, but I'm just pointing out that, you know, it's a 24-hour thing, but I don't know that you've got people coming there 24 hours. I think it's 24 hours where they're watching the dogs and it evolves into an animal thing, but I think usually that's a very small part of their business. They use the staff that's there, sort of like when Jewel used to be open 24. You're using the stocking staff to keep things on. You have one cashier, that kind of a thing, but
And they don't have sirens for them.
Well, no, but I think if you have an emergency with your animal in the middle of the night, that was where their advantage was. I mean, now you either have to go to Arboretum or they said Lyle or something, that they would be a new location for that, but.
And I want to
again, moot
circle us
point.
back here to a couple good ideas before we forget about them, because Greg, you had some great ideas, and Steve, you had an awesome idea that I want to ask John, if it's legal. Can we legally prohibit someone from speaking at a village board meeting about an issue if they already gave written or oral testimony to planning and zoning meeting?
Yes, you can prohibit someone from speaking whether they spoke or not.
Okay,
You have to have a portion on your agenda where the public's allowed to speak, and that's kind of the open forum area. You can restrict all testimony to open forum. You may get people wanting to say, well, I want to speak on an agenda item. You have the right to say no. You know, you've got open forum. You can speak on whatever subject, including the agenda items during open forum, and you can limit their ability to speak to, 2-3 minutes. It's because it's not a public hearing in front of the village board. Your interest is reviewing these items and voting on them. The public hearing is the public hearing. That's when it's really virtually unlimited testimony.
I had a conversation, probably a couple years ago now, but, the people that are convinced because they're at the podium that that's the truth. And can't you clarify that with a statement that says, even though these people have spoken before the board, it's not necessarily fact, and make that statement before they talk?
I believe I did actually make the statement during the vet discussion before the village board that all of this testimony was not made at planning and zoning, is not under oath, so you have to give it limited consideration and admissibility.
you absolutely did, John.
Yeah,
I just finished watching it for the second time today.
Yeah, and I'm convinced that we understood that it wasn't all true, but does everybody else understand that?
Right. That vet also, remember that I think was Dr. Main was the other vet, used to be on Ogden Avenue and was encouraged to relocate off Ogden Avenue because he was a vet use and not a retail use. I think that was a consideration that came into play.
It did, and I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we started the meeting by saying that the service versus sales is going to always be an issue between philosophies on different boards. And I know that you heard, I also heard recently that the motel might be looked at for sale. So there are possibilities that somebody else is going to purchase it that would be more sales oriented. I think our biggest dilemma is if we deny people for speaking to us, do we then have to go to the planning and zoning if we want to ask questions? Or can we call them, if we want to ask questions to 4 or 5 of the petitioner, or people who have objections, if we don't allow them to speak, then how do we ask them questions that we heard at the planning and zoning?
Right, you don't.
You don't.
Your questions are of the
There were
petitioner.
no questions, which I was surprised at. You guys went into the votes immediately, and I mean, I even felt uncomfortable watching because heads were down and there was no eye contact. I thought the doctor did a nice job, and he put a lot of time and money into designing that, and I think, he got just a straight up no without even anybody asking him a question, and I felt that that's always something that when somebody makes the effort to come before us to do that, I always feel like speaking to that person directly and saying that. But back to this question that Steve has brought up, is there a graduated way to do this? So first would be the couple of things we talked about, increasing the area, having staff responsible, and changing the scope of the letter to encourage people that this is the manner in which it is handled, outlining it explicitly and saying, after this is disposed of by planning and zoning with either a favorable or an unfavorable recommendation, it will be presented to the Village of Westmont Board of Trustees. And at that point, it can be put in there that the village board maintains, based on scheduling and things like that, the right to hear testimony or not to hear testimony because the hearing has already been conducted.
Here's my problem with that.
Okay.
And that's a good idea. I think
Because
we're getting there.
A year later, if it's really not working, then you tighten that another notch, and eventually you say, okay, there is no more. That it's a 3-step. But please.
Yeah, I'm always a proponent of consistent application. Whatever your rules are, your rules are. So if you're going to let people speak, let them speak at the village board level. If you're not going to let them speak, don't let them speak for any development. Well, what makes one development worthy of hearing people speak just because?
Well, and many things don't come before planning and zoning.
Right.
If it doesn't require a variance or special use, we don't get it. So we see, maybe a third of the items that are on your agenda, okay? So we don't see that many of them, and many of them are for lack of a better term, no-brainers somewhat. They're relatively straightforward. This was a controversial one. There's 1 or 2 more in the hopper right now that fall into that category. But by and large, most of them are either fairly straightforward or we tweak them with associated conditions and things like that, and we get it to the way we want it. So I was just thinking it's not, but I do agree that you almost have to go all or none. I agree with that, but.
Well, and no excuses for us, I'm sorry, for us being new or anything like that, but I think we're also learning as we go. I think the last meeting with the dance studio, I think we all came away with a lesson from that, having her up there rebuttal with everybody, and it just was not a productive meeting, and I don't think we'll let that happen again as far as, people being able to be at the podium, the opposition and the person for it, it makes it uncomfortable a little bit. And again, I think the mayor and everyone, we talked about that afterwards, that, you had your time, sit down, and there really shouldn't be that rebuttal.
Yeah.
You had your presentation time, now let's hear the other side, and then we decide at that point.
With the example of the veterinarian, like Harold, from the get-go, I knew that this was not something I could support. I still, and I strongly believe, and I agree, she may never sell that, but someday she might. She's not gonna hold it forever. The right price comes, everything is for sale if the right price is there. And there, I strongly believe there's a chance to assemble some land there and come up with, I mean, this is Ogden Avenue. This is our corridor. You know, I'm not proud of the fact that we would have a business there that would have maybe 200 dogs inside, never to go outside, boarded. That doesn't even seem, that seems inhumane to me. So I had reasons why I didn't like that plan to begin with. I wouldn't have voted for it regardless of what people said to me. If 200 people were in the room and said, vote for it, vote for it, vote for it, I'd have to stick with my gut and say, no, I did not support it from the get-go.
Craig, you?
I see both ways here, and I see why they should come before us and talk and give testimony under oath, and that, you can't guarantee honesty. You know, you can't, they're gonna get up, some people are gonna get up, they're gonna showboat, or think they are, and you're gonna have to just sit there and judge the best of your ability. But when it comes, and I know how you want to cut that down, but to tell people that they actually cannot talk, it's a bad vibe that people can use, like we see in Washington all the time, both sides. You use and spin it any way you want. So I think we need great guidance by the attorney on what's possible and what's right, and if you could push it, most of the testimony to us, that'd be great. But like you say, their battle plan was to leapfrog us and do without.
And perhaps maybe just this longer, more clarifying letter will do its duty with some people, and you can go ahead, and that can be worded fairly strong, and just say that great weight is given to testimony under oath, and all testimony at Planning and Zoning is reviewed by members of the village board. Great weight is given to that testimony, et cetera, et cetera. Those people speaking at a village board meeting, while not under oath, testimony is not weighted with nearly the same importance. I don't know, I'm just playing around with it, but those might be some possible solutions.
Just a technical question I have. Jill, do we provide a letter template to the petitioner, and then they take that and, like Greg did, and went and got the addresses and mailed them themselves? Is that really how it works?
So what we do is we send them to the township assessor, and they garner the addresses and the property owners. They give us a list, and then they give us the envelopes, and then we create the public notice and mail it out to make sure that it goes out.
Okay.
That has to be specific, because it has to have, the item number and the date and all that stuff on it. But it's not that detailed of a letter. It is regarding the subject.
Technicality stuff, right.
Right, but I think, what I'm saying is there should be a much more informative section that details the process and the importance and the weight given to those things.
I will say this, a lot of communities do it differently. Some communities put the burden on the applicant to not only come up with the names of surrounding property owners, but to do the mailing, and do the mailing at their own expense. Some communities will handle it in-house and build it into the fees they charge the applicant. Sometimes it's a mixture. Sometimes they'll provide a form notification letter that they have to review and approve, and that's what has to go out. And then the applicant comes in with a stack of the green cards and an affidavit of mailing that they mailed it. So there's no right or wrong way, but I will say that having it done in-house is the safest way to make sure that the list is accurate and everyone gets notified. And as far as expanding the range, it is a greater cost, it is greater effort and time involved to do that, but that does provide greater notification. So what I'd recommend, Jill, is maybe we go through a couple of examples of some dense areas and some not so dense areas, and see what it takes, how many people would get notified, what the cost is, maybe what the difference is compared to how we handle it currently, and then come back with a recommendation if we think like 1,000 feet is feasible.
Okay.
The village certainly has the power, the police and zoning power to to require greater notice rather than less notice.
John, you
And
bring
maybe
up-
one way that we could look into with the improvement of the signage is possibly where we would leave those letters on the sign. You see a lot of these today have, you know, a please take one with it, where if a concerned resident was driving by and he saw the sign, he could actually go poll to find out what the information would
literature
be.
bin, yeah.
You know,
Like a realtor
if he
sign.
was 1,200 feet out and he was concerned, he could stop there and, you know, whatever, if we put 20 in and 20 were taken, we know next time we put 30 in or.
So we could have our inspectors check them.
John, you brought up,
Point of clarification, though, on that
Like that.
vet hospital on the second hearing, that was a continued hearing, right?
Yes.
Second one? We had already approved it in the first one, and we
Yes.
were coming back for a landscape plan. If you invited them there to give the kind of testimony they gave to the village board, Eddie would have gavelled them and said, we've already gone through this. The only reason we're here tonight, it's on the agenda, we could only do what's published in the agenda, is the landscape plan.
you're right, I didn't think of that when I invited him. That was beyond me at that point. But you brought up an interesting thing, John. So do you see, because your firm, it works with other towns and things like that, do you see this issue in other towns? And if so, how, the issue I'm talking about is coming and bringing a bunch of people in to the village board and bypassing planning and zoning. And is there a solution in other towns? Maybe your idea where we're coming up with a solution to the letter based on other towns, maybe there's a solution this way also.
I generally don't see other towns' village board meetings allowing public comment on each and every agenda item, particularly when there's been a previous public hearing. They won't allow it. They'll say, it's open forum, here's your chance to make comments, and we're going to limit it to 2 minutes. And they have, as a result, more efficiently run village board meetings. Seen that in Naperville, Winfield. I mean, I can give you tons of communities that restrict testimony like that. And it's not that they're trying to be unfair to the residents, it's that there's a process, and perhaps because it's been ingrained in the residents that this is how it works, they get used to it and they come to the public hearings. Wheaton, I've been to many public hearings in Wheaton, and they jam-pack their planning and zoning commission hearings. But they know they're not going to get the same bite at the apple in front of the city council.
I've heard some.
Can we go down then? Can you, if you took the village board agenda, and, you know, those are lengthy, they're several pages long, and let's say there were 3 items that had a public hearing, could those 3 just be excluded because public hearing has been completed? That might be your long-term solution, and it might become more of a 2-step process with a stronger letter to start, and that is the follow-up.
Yes, you can do that.
I've heard some good suggestions here tonight from you folks. One, I think we should increase to a minimum of 500 feet.
Yeah.
And maybe cost-effective 750 feet if 1,000 is too expensive. Secondly, I think in this mailing, the context of the letter should say, you are being notified that the only input you will have on this will be at the Planning and Zoning Commission where you will be sworn in. And this may affect you. It behooves you to attend this meeting.
Okay?
Okay, I think that should be in part of the context of the letter.
Again, John, we would be, and I'm probably the one that allows, I like the opportunity for residents to get the opportunity to speak, that we're representing them, but maybe limiting the items that have gone before the planning and zoning, that then I have to be consistent and not let anybody talk, if that's the ruling. The other thing is, and I've been around long enough to know, then your public open forum will become like 20 people. If they know that, they'll be talking about the vet thing during open forum, which I don't think you can regulate, because I've seen that in the past too.
Sure.
You get all of them lined up, and they'll make the same speech they made under the agenda item. So there's ways around it. And I'm open to look at maybe just restricting the planning and zoning. And the other concern for the village board is that and I know staff felt this way, I know Larry and Jill, we had a meeting. The message we're sending to the businesses when we don't give them kind of the reason, and they've gone through economic development, they've gone through planning and zoning, they think it's and then we vote it down without any reasoning, and I don't know if that's good or bad. Jen, we talked about it, but I know staff has a little concern about it. So I don't know if you, Larry, Jill?
I got some feedback from some of the brokers in the community and people that had spoken with the vet, and they were very disappointed that they didn't get any feedback or just reasoning why. And I understand that, sometimes it's better to be brief than to talk too much, and Attorney Zemanek might want to speak to that, but I do think it's helpful just because I think the vet had a really bad taste in his mouth at the end of the presentation.
That bothered me too with, the economic development meeting. It was a split vote in there, and, half people were for it and half were against it. And I was for the project, just not in that location.
Right.
And you couldn't, you didn't have an opportunity to get that across at all because you had the hearing, and I watched that, and it was very good. And then the night of the presentations here that went on and on forever. But it was almost like they were led to believe that they were going to be successful when that isn't the case at all, because the whole process is all three of those steps. And by the time we sit here on that night and listen to everybody talk, finally everything comes out. The neighbors that complain, the facts come out, hopefully their presentation comes out, whether it's true or not, or going to happen. We're kind of aware of that. So I think the process works, but these people that are coming, like the veterinarian, he's led to believe that, it came through those two meetings without a definite, hey, there are some real issues here. Because I met all these bars, and then it comes to us, and, I mean, there was nothing more to say to the man after we voted no, so there was no point in, we could clearly see it was aggravated. There was no point in adding to that frustration. And it, was probably a bit of a blindside on his part. And then the question is, how does it get that far?
I regret not giving my reasons that night. I regret not.
Well, and Harold, the problem is, we all had different reasons.
Well, and that's it.
It's okay.
I personally,
Tell them all the reasons.
I personally looked at the dance studio as really more of a conflict between the commission and the board. And I was at home watching that one, and when she was done, people here were, well, thank you for staying in town. The village attorney, he commented afterwards that, boy, their pickup and drop off is so efficient here. It's going to work out great for you guys on Cass. And I remember at home I was cringing, thinking, oh my goodness, you are giving this petitioner the idea that this is a slam dunk. And I was very fearful of the drop off of the children and so forth on Cass. So, it's one of those things where I feel for the petitioner, because I think Larry, she was really under the understanding that it was kind of going to get done, right? I mean,
I think she had a pretty high degree of confidence that it was going to get approved. And we were receiving feedback, and we had multiple meetings with her to express some of the challenges and concerns. And we directly recommended she go out and meet with specific people that we heard feedback from that were concerned. In some cases, those folks did not provide all that same feedback that we had heard. So there were many mixed messages on many levels.
so again, I think just as, I think the earlier commission is no different than the EDC, we kind of have to watch what we lay out to these people, like, okay, we'll be at your grand opening. Well, if we tell them that at the EDC, boy, that's a long way away from being a slam dunk.
You bring a good point up there, Harold. And a lot of times, after we have taken our vote, I remind the people that we are only a recommending body, but I don't do it all the time. And I'm going to change my way.
That's the same thing at EDC, too. We haven't done that in the past, and just at the last meeting. We made sure that when they left, this is an advisory only, the village board can still make up their mind up or down, no matter what.
So
I think that has to be expressed to everybody, you're right.
Yeah, I will make sure that I tell everybody we are strictly advisory, a recommending body.
Because we've had that at Mr. Chairman. At the EDC, if you
Mr.
remember.
Addington, were you, I thought you left.
Is he here? No. And I think this has been a tremendous discussion, because out of it has come a couple of really good new ideas. And so maybe I think this is real positive. But my own personal opinion, and I think I've it's ancient history. I have to go back and I think I voted no at economic development also. But I think that petitioner really did his homework and really orchestrated to get the vote that they got.
Yep.
I mean, they worked hard at whether they brought it to planning and zoning or brought it to village board, they worked. I think that was to some extent an anomaly of the way it normally will not happen. But it happened in that case because they were a little more savvy. They had tons of customers. Matter of fact, I think a couple of the vets who work for them, actually, one of them for sure, I think, lived in town, and I think that's the one that said, "I'm a voter." It was one of, and laid that out. But they had people who were contacting us who were from the community who actually did business there. And so therefore, I just look at that as, yeah, it happened, and it happened this way, but I think it was more of a special set of circumstances in that case than what we see on a normal
I
basis.
think you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Because when I think back to, again, the cell towers and Standard Market, another great example of a lot of community input against. But this was a very unique situation. I think you just hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And I think Bob and Ed, you guys just sort of capsulized it when you said, we need to do a better job of reminding these people, the buck stops here, that EDC and Planning and Zoning is an advisory board with a recommendation. Doesn't mean the board's always going to take that recommendation or agree with it, but, we just need to do a better job of getting all of that information out, at least going 500 feet minimally. Keeping it in-house, I think, is genius. A lot of good stuff just happened here.
That's what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
maybe it's just as well that this came down the way it did, because it's fermenting discussion, and out of that discussion has come, I think, 3 good things for us to work on, so that the future maybe goes a little smoother. We still have to address the situation with the dance studio. No, we're not?
They decided to renew their lease here.
Really? So
Let's
we
put it this
saved
way,
you again.
The owner of the building told them they had to renew the lease by Friday. And she chose, because of all the controversy, she didn't want to upset anybody.
She'd rather be someplace than no place.
She's meeting with Joe, looking at maybe some south end of town.
Okay. Good. So we're still working with her and helping her.
But staff has done a great job in the last year of educating the people in the process. When I first was elected, people would come to the EDC, and they thought that was the end all. If you remember the mini mart, he said, okay, we're in. And I've noticed now that people are aware that they have this 3-step process. It's not, the confusion is gone. So positive to you guys in what's been, the change that's been there.
I'd be interested in hearing from Larry just on one point about the dance.
You would.
I had a comment this past weekend that, from a resident that she was really raked over the coals here at the village board meeting. And I didn't get into it with them, but I didn't feel that was the case. What's her impression? We tried to give her, in our questioning, that we love their business, but this might not be the best location, at
So
least.
the comment one more time was, I'm not sure if I,
That she was raked over the coals when she was here making her presentation to the village board.
Did she convey that to you?
Yes.
How did she feel like that?
I did not get that message. I've talked to both her and her dad. Matter of fact, talked to her dad a few times.
I did too.
Yeah.
So I did not hear that
I think
comment.
what she wants to be a good neighbor to everybody, and because of the objection, she just felt it wasn't, she didn't want to move forward.
Right.
And then when I talked to her father, they were, accepted the decision, weren't angry about it, so.
Yeah, well, and that's perfect,
Right.
But I don't want to have to go back and watch the tape and see that we
It's
weren't.
perfect, but it's sad because we never voted on it, and a message was sent that maybe was sent prematurely because we had planned on talking about it again tomorrow night.
Yeah.
So she walked out thinking she didn't have a chance.
Well, she may have
In fact,
still,
several of us thought it was a good idea.
if
so
she wasn't
I feel bad
forced
about
to
that.
sign the lease, I think she may have continued to pursue it, but she was kind of backed in the corner where she needed to sign the lease to stay here by that Friday.
Yeah.
So that kind of made up her mind.
Can I make one quick comment?
Yeah.
About, some of you have said, boy, should we give reasons at the village board level for denying something, or if you're in favor, why you're in favor. And, you know, as an attorney, sometimes you're like, boy, is this going to be a cringeworthy moment when you say, what's your reason?
More money.
I think this bakery is going to hurt my favorite bakery. I don't want more competition in town. You're out of here. You know, you can't deny a rezoning or a use because of competition. And, you know, you guys,
Been done.
I think, but know that. Or, and I hate to say it, I'm Catholic and I don't want the Presbyterian church nearby, or whatever the reason is. You know, there are some of those cringeworthy moments, but that said, you know, if someone were to file a legal challenge, it's called a trial de novo on that legal challenge to a rezoning or special use, which means at the trial, it's all new evidence, all evidence is heard for the first time. You can bring in new evidence that wasn't brought up before. Well, yes, they could have a transcript of what you all said. It's ultimately the judge's determination based on all the new evidence presented, whether the decision was, you know, a reasonable exercise of your legislative discretion, not specifically what you said at the meeting. So feel free to give your reasons if you think it will, you know, inform the applicant better, yeah.
Well, and the other thing I might add to this, we'll use the veterinary one. What, does anyone want to venture a guess at what his out-of-pocket costs were to get to that point that night? With those blueprints and the plans and all the time and the number of people and stuff?
40 to 60,000.
I'm sure it was at least 50,000 is the number I had in my mind.
Joe, any idea on what that would have been?
I know Mariano's was over 100,000 minimum in due diligence just to get through the public hearing process, not to mention all the other engineering stuff. So
Yeah, I just think that has somewhat of a cause and effect, and you know, and I also think that guy is somebody who puts towns on the map, because I think he's a great publicist, and I think he writes articles and, you know, that kind of stuff, and I think that's another tie-in, but that's, I think, one of the reasons for wanting. I like to usually give somebody a comment if they've taken time out of their busy life and come before us to present some type of a business or a plan to put a deck on their home or whatever it is. That's an improvement to our community, at least as they see it. I like to look them in the eye and say, this is what I think, and either good luck or, hey, I'm sorry, but I can't support that. It's my 2 cents.
Well, that was one of the reasons why, way back when, we combined the two boards, because zoning was running into a problem way back then of having items on their agenda, but when they did have somebody new coming in, they went to planning, they went to zoning, they went to the village board, and, you know, and back then it was, bring your attorney, bring your architect, bring your builder, bring your landscaper, and you're paying all those people to sit there, and as many of you have know from back then, there was so much building going on that those Thursday night meetings, when all those people were here, sometimes they were going till 11, 12 o'clock at night. And you're paying somebody to sit there and listen to somebody else's petition.
Well, there was a period of time there, Jim, when I was chair of the zoning, and we had no meetings.
No meetings.
And the place was exploding.
Yeah.
We didn't have an agenda, there were no meetings. Everything went right to the board.
So we combined it.
Can we, this is all good discussion, but I think staff, we want to at least get into the TIF districts, and maybe, I know Larry and Joe may have some other things they want to run by the two boards.
Yes. I can move over to the Naperville and Cass district, which is part of the TIF area in the downtown. It's a complicated corridor, which could be realigned. It could act as a gateway into the community. It could create a transition from the downtown. And in addition, they are all located within the TIF district, which can help future redevelopment. Another complicated project that we recently saw was the used auto sales business, which recently proposed to take over 20 East Chicago and use the back for auto sales and service and keep the residential apartments up front. This was given a positive recommendation from EDC, a positive recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission. and it was ultimately denied by the village board. The business plan changed from the time of the EDC presentation to the final vote, which promoted a lot of staff concern about the business operation. This area in general has had a lot of underutilized properties and non-conforming uses that have developed over time, and this makes development reviews complex. And in addition, hopefully we'll be seeing more redevelopment with the TIF in this area. So are there any thoughts on the Naperville Cass area?
Has there ever been any discussion about consolidation of some of those parcels?
Yes.
Because, it's so, there's old houses there that are used as businesses. There's businesses next to old houses, next to other businesses. They're all old businesses, too.
Next to vacant lots?
Yeah, next to vacant lots. It really, there's no consistency there whatsoever.
Right. Yeah, we have discussed it, but there's been no active, we haven't approached the businesses. Larry, have you had any discussions about conglomerations?
It's a corridor that does need a lot of TLC.
Yeah.
And down the road, as we move through the TIF district on 63rd and downtown, and I would hope we take a more closer look at that. But in terms of our discussion with developers, there haven't been as many discussions when we look at the number of discussions on that corridor compared to Ogden Avenue compared to 63rd Street. The number's much smaller there, so hence the activity, for at least for the foreseeable future, is somewhat limited.
Right.
I believe we'll be updated tomorrow, but, the fire chief signed, but I think some of those buildings in there are still not up to compliance on their fire alarm, correct?
That I'm not sure
one?
about.
Two. There's two. I
Okay.
remember them yesterday.
Yeah, but there will be an update tomorrow. Any comments about 20 East Chicago?
Well, he hasn't gone away.
I haven't heard from him in a little while.
He still wants the building, so it's, what do you do with that, And the last proposal that, when he had called me and he said that everything would be inside. No sales outside, no doors open, no anything. And he still wanted the building for tenants to help pay for his investment, with the long-term idea of selling it to a developer who would, combine the properties.
Right. And that's been kind of a difficult situation for staff to be in, because sometimes developers will come in and say that they want to take over a building and improve a vacant building for the time being, and then they'll sell it to a developer later, but then there's no strings attached to say when that can happen, and, you can't really force somebody to sell, so, you have to look at the long term too about it.
20 Chicago, Rico.
I think he's naive in his opinion of the tenants that may be there too.
And what is the current status of that building? Is that in foreclosure? Is it bank-owned?
It's bank-owned.
It's bank-owned, so then are those tenants there paying rent to the bank? Is that, or are they flopping, or what's the scenario
No,
there?
they would typically, the bank would step into the shoes of the owner and collect rents and be responsible for management and things like that.
That hasn't been happening over there.
And we feel that's going on there?
We've heard mixed messages, but I do know that the bank did take over the property.
So if those people were just flopping there, and there is no relationship back to the bank, what is our course of action?
Well, we can find out who the legal owner is in a matter of hours by doing a public record search, seeing who the last deed belongs to. If the bank took over in foreclosure, they would have a deed in foreclosure showing they're the owner.
Wouldn't the real estate company know that, though?
If they want to be forthright with you, absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, they should tell you, and you've got every right to go after the bank as the legal owner as you would, Joe Blow on the street.
But in theory, if we found out those residents there were flopping, could then the police take action to remove them?
No, that's a private dispute. You can let the bank know, hey, you've got people living here who aren't under a lease and aren't paying rent. You might want to do something about it because it could be a public health situation, but that's up to them.
So that building has, I guess the landlord has to have the power, right? Or individuals would have power there? How does that work?
You mean in terms of the bank?
Well, it's having power and water and everything else at that building. I mean, I'm assuming we would know if people are paying or not, correct?
We haven't shut the water. Someone's paying.
Right. As far as I know, the water is still in operation.
Somebody's paying.
Somebody's paying.
Well, they're paying utilities at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
somebody's paying the bills to keep the building viable, because if they shut everything down, then there's a deterioration of.
As far as we know.
Of the property completely.
We don't know that there's power in that building.
Chief, do you know have you heard any issues about? Okay.
Yeah.
But it is a legal non-conforming use.
Correct.
That was my next question, was what's the current status, and it's still considered.
Yeah, apartments
Was
are
the
not.
zoning ever changed to make that building any way, shape, or form legal?
You know, kind of the goal is when you have less than desirable businesses in a district, let's say a commercial district, and you have a dilapidated apartment, is, you know, you keep your zoning the same to prohibit those uses with the hope that they're phased out over time. And sometimes it requires a little persistence by the local government to make sure that happens. If you feel like there's a place for apartments in our B1 district, then, is that B1 there? Or is that B2? B2.
B2.
In the B2 district, then yeah, you always have the right to change the zoning.
Reason, I voted no in that particular case, but nothing to do with the petitioner as much as my concern was, because there's not a lot of area around it, was where are all the, you know, what I saw, because the type of business was gonna be these little 2 and 3 car trailers, and they were just gonna, and with the number of cars he was talking about, I could see 2 or 3 of those parked right there on Naperville Road, loading and unloading every day or more. And if he became super successful, to me, that was the biggest negative, is having all that. But as Trustee Scott mentioned more than once, here was a guy who was willing to come in and take an eyesore and do something with it to at least clean up some of the looks of it. And if somebody could address the issue of the cars and the car trailers and things, you know, maybe that can be relooked at some point down the road. Because, yeah, that building is gonna stay just like it is until it collapses, because I don't know, you know, the question is, who will the bank find to go in there? It failed as a restaurant, it failed as a body shop, you know, and it is non-conforming because it's
Well, and
a business in the back and all these apartments in the front.
And he was in a tough position because it is approved non-conforming.
Yeah,
He's limited to how he could even improve that building,
Yeah.
and it needs far more improvement than putting in a new microwave. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you know, it just,
yeah. That's almost like new doors, new thresholds, and almost gut every one of those apartments, but just to improve the looks. But that was, again, that's one of those issues where, you know, and we've talked about it before, it's just the amount of traffic. And I guess I lived for all these years with so many businesses that have come into this town who were far more successful than we thought they were going to be. And one of the prime examples I can use is the one over by you, Slammers, when they were there, and they were parking up and down where Sue's subdivision, to the point where I couldn't have gotten an ambulance down the street if we had to.
they blocked my driveway one night. I couldn't
Yeah.
get in my garage.
And it wasn't that, they just were that successful. And there just wasn't enough parking. So, you know, I think that's the scary part is now, and we have it again, we talked about Porsche and talked about a couple of others, is they're successful, and where do they go with that success? And it means they go out on the street.
Does,
Or what?
I know you've got another
Or move, yeah.
example to look at, but do you want to get to maybe the TIF districts so we can maybe talk about that? That's probably,
Yes, as I mentioned, the Naperville and Cass area is part of the downtown TIF district, and then we can focus on the central business district. We mentioned earlier, as the economy has strengthened, we've seen significantly more interest in the downtown. Tenants are moving in, businesses are expanding, developers have expressed interest in a large mixed-use transit-oriented project, and there are less vacancies. Previously, most of the service or school-type uses that needed special uses were approved, especially during the downturn when it was difficult to fill any vacancies. Now that we're seeing this upturn, it's a good time to discuss the vision for the downtown. The comp plan recommends mixed use with a focus on restaurants and retail on the ground floor, supported by service uses and offices above the ground floor. There's also an emphasis on retaining and strengthening existing businesses. As we continue to receive requests for non-retail and restaurant businesses in the downtown, it might be good to open up the discussion to discuss the downtown and its goals and the TIF in addition.
All right, who's first?
Well, just give us an idea of who has been looking downtown. Anybody you can mention?
Well, I was thinking, not to go back over it, but Expressions, for example. It's a good example of the comp plan recommends retaining existing businesses, encouraging expansions, which is what she wanted to do. At the same time, it's a service use with, difficult parking needs. It's not promoting too much retail. So you can argue both sides of the comp plan in a situation like that. So it was hard to work with Expressions because, again, we want to encourage businesses, to expand and we want to keep them in Westmont, but it was a difficult situation, so.
You have anything to add, Larry? I know he's thinking. Oh, he's thinking, and
Well, it kind of comes back to the discussion, service, retail, restaurants. And when you look at our downtown business district, we've come out of a very long economic downturn. And we have turned the corner, and we are getting more developers knocking on our door for a variety of projects. And so that discussion will be, what is it that we're looking for? So we need to have really a shared vision on what our downtown's going to be looking like over the next several years. So again, that's really important for us when we're talking with prospective businesses, talking with businesses that are here in terms of retention, and basically working to make downtown a very viable district.
You do see a trend of more upscale apartments, still some condos, but there have been a lot of apartment developments that have either recently been approved and built or under proposal. I know 2 in Glen Ellen, there were a number in Wheaton recently, and this just happened to be because I'm in that area all the time. But, they're taller than you typically have seen historically in these downtowns. They have a retail component on their first floor. It's picking up in a lot of communities.
We can anticipate those type of developers knocking on our door. You see it up and down the rail line. If you compare the southwest suburbs here, the Ogden Avenue corridor, compare it to the Northwest Highway corridor, Mount Prospect, Des Plaines, look at this Arlington Heights as another example in the last 15 years, how their downtown has transformed into a whole different look. You can see how they've changed their look and image along that corridor. The Southwest corridor hasn't experienced the same type of growth, but you can see in suburbs around us, they have now 4, 5, 6-story buildings, and their downtown business districts are close to their downtown business districts. And if you look at a very successful community like LaGrange, what supports their downtown business district is the residential density within walking distance. If you look just west of LaGrange Road, what they've built in the last 20 years, a lot of 5, 6, 7-story buildings, and those people support that downtown business district. And a lot of it obviously is a transit-oriented design component. We also not only have the benefit and the beauty of our transit-oriented design program with the rail line, but our location to 88, 83, 355, 294, 55 gives us another advantage. Layer on top of that our close proximity, 30 minutes to O'Hare, 30 minutes to Midway. I mean, we're just in a great situation.
So remember, we went to Des Plaines and we saw the potential of what Westmont downtown could be, what we saw at Des Plaines.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, with the amount of apartment buildings that were built down there with a train right there.
I was downtown LaGrange today at the corner of LaGrange Road and Cosset. It's a retirement home, a multifamily retirement home, and it's actually inland. Leanne Stoswick, if a lot of people remember her from Ogden there, and now Inland has bought into this retirement, and what a great situation. The residents there, it's not assisted living. They walk around downtown. Very few of them have automobiles. They have a bus that takes them to the local grocery store and so forth. But these people, they hit the lobby and they're right downtown. And they're out using the businesses. So you can see where there can be a wonderful mix with the TOD.
Be nice to have that right in back of Bale's hardware store, wouldn't it?
Steve May?
Steve, wake up.
What's underneath the, what utilities are underground on the alleys on both sides?
Well, it's certainly got to be different at different locations, but each alley, whether it's in the CBD or in the residential areas, that's the primary route for all the sanitary sewer mains. And that's pretty consistent throughout all the alleys. When you get into the CBD, the only thing extraordinary that I'm aware of is the east side of Cass Avenue, the East Linden, the Cass Avenue Linden Alley has a very large Commonwealth Edison high voltage duct in it, and it comes all the way from the substation up on Melrose and actually crosses the tracks at our parking lot over here by Amber, and it's part of their distribution. But other than that, there's the wood power poles, so all the ComEd and the services for power, phone, and cable television are all up on those poles. And I can't think of anything else. I don't know of any fiber or anything, but there's a lot there. They're well used. I wish there was more storm sewer in them, but there isn't.
Well, I go back again to presentations that were made several years ago, and one of them was in Dr. Martin, Steve Martin, who sat on this board for many years, had said, he always wanted to find out a way of, getting rid of the alleys and expanding the commercial property, and even going over to the side streets, and, maybe over a period of time, the older homes would go away and you need a string of townhouses or something, but then make a deeper commercial property where you could get the bigger businesses. I even saw a presentation, and this goes back a few years ago, where somebody like a J.C. Penney's would come in, and they'd only have 50 feet on Cass Avenue, but they would be downstairs, and then you had a lot of little businesses next to him, or next to Penney's, but Penney's was behind and below. And so it was a huge store, but all you saw was the 50 feet on the street. And those kind of things make a lot of sense, but it also would be a monumental change from what we have today. But it would attract bigger and stronger businesses. But the problem is then you start, that's why I asked the question, if you have to move all your utilities, now you're looking at an unbelievable cost.
There is one example. I mean, if you think of the bank, although it's mostly parking, but they do have the drive up, and they were able to bridge the alley and function on both sides. That's the closest example we have to what you're describing.
But the drive-up isn't running anymore.
But when it was running,
It's not being used.
I walked that tunnel many a time.
That'd be a good piece of property to develop.
yes.
What about what's everybody's idea of parking in the downtown? Do we have enough parking, or do we need more? Because
We
I'll tell
talked
you,
about that the other day. Here they go, yeah.
I had always thought that
We need more.
And yet, really.
where we got the parking lot on the northeast corner of the tracks, if we were to realign that street, come straight out to Cass, and that area could be back towards where the water tanks are, could be a multi-level parking garage, perhaps even at least one level below grade, because you'd be down by the railroad tracks. You could have a street level parking, you could have one story above street. You'd be able to park a heck of a lot of cars and not infringe too much in height.
All good ideas. Oh, Joe.
I was just going to note that the comprehensive plan says that we do not have a parking problem, and that's based on some of the parking studies that have been done in the past, and it recommends having better directional signage for parking and just to alert people to where it is and how to find public parking. The studies say that, if you have to walk a couple blocks, that's not too far. And we, typically when I go out to lunch in the downtown, I never have to walk more than a block or two, to get to a restaurant. And also, typically, it's considered good to have a parking problem in the downtown if we did have one. If you look at places like Naperville, you sometimes have to walk half a mile to get to restaurants and retail, but it's thriving and people are willing to do that.
Loop,
Well,
Right?
downtown.
I'm afraid I have to disagree with them. I think they're wrong.
That being said, I think that as we do more redevelopments, we have to encourage parking and, incorporating public parking along with that, just so people do have that ability to park.
And we've actually had a couple of informal proposals for exactly that, a parking garage on that corner that never really came to fruition, but you're right, you go to Naperville and you walk 6 blocks, and you do it because they've got a great downtown with wonderful restaurants, and you're not always gonna get a parking space right in front of the door you wanna walk in.
Right.
I like it when I come downtown and we have to drive around to find a parking space. We always find one, though. I've never been in this situation where I could not find parking in Westmont.
Well, you've got parking all the way down to
Yeah.
tracks.
Exactly.
You've got
You
parking
just
in
have
the
to
train
walk.
parking lot, that at
and we're-
nighttime, there's nobody there. So
we
there's,
have I think we have.
you know, if that
plenty
was
of
full and it was down, 3 blocks, you might have something to think about at that point, but it just never gets filled.
I think we have adequate parking, just not always in the right areas.
Well,
And,
people-
yeah, there's always open a spot, but, if we're gonna encourage more businesses to come downtown, hence this dance studio we talked about, the one issue that we're against it was there's not enough spots for you, traffic was an issue. So if we could, I encourage everybody to look at Highland Parks downtown. It's fantastic. They have an underground parking facility that's literally in the heart of all the restaurants, and you can't even tell it's there. There's some above-ground sections, but a majority of it's underground, and it's pretty cool. It's a pie-in-the-sky idea, but, if you want these big guys to come in, you gotta make it convenient for customers to get there. Because you can go to Downers Grove and park, and you're, everywhere within a block, or you have to park down by the train station 3 blocks away. It's just not as easy as it is. And these days, you gotta cater to the customers to get them to come. So I'm more with him. I think it is more of a problem than the comprehensive plan thinks. It has to be convenient for people.
Has any thought been given to revising our fee schedule in for drawing new development? Perhaps reducing
Increasing or
permits?
reducing?
Reducing.
We have been looking into that. Jill or Larry, go ahead.
For the fees for the applications or for the?
In total?
Total, all the fees.
Engineering, application, everything?
Yes, yeah, we've talked about doing some more things in-house in order to reduce the consultant fees and things like that. Yeah.
To answer, we've been looking into it to try to reduce it, so we're not the highest, we're not the lowest, but we're very competitive. So I think the staff has been looking into it. We had somewhat of a committee looking into it. Bruce, through Westmont First, had a couple realtors. So we're trying to analyze our fees so that we encourage development in town and not discourage it. So.
Right.
Do you want to hit on the south? I think we started mentioning it earlier, the South TIF. I know the 3 pieces of property that Greg talked about is kind of our pain as far as the development down there.
Yeah. These are the longer parcels that we talked about, the UPS, AT&T. We talked about the bus yard issue, which we'll continue to work on. And I feel like the properties in both the TIFs should be given special consideration, particularly if they have the ability to be redeveloped. We'll try to emphasize that more in staff reports. And the consultants who developed the TIF and the comprehensive plan developed them almost in conjunction. They reviewed both documents and tried to keep everything consistent so that all the recommendations are very similar as you're looking at new properties in the 63rd and Cass area.
Does that go to the farm? Is that where it ends?
Yes.
Like the, And then the little sliver going further north, is that the Clark or the? that little extension going on 61st Street, is it? Right? Come towards this.
This
no,
way?
No, the one, no.
Down.
Down. No, the little, right there.
This one.
Right
That's
there.
that's the detention basin.
Oh, okay.
On Benford?
Between the townhomes and the single-family homes.
And again, in any TIF district, and we've discussed this before, you need an anchor to stimulate development, and this one has the anchor coming in.
Right.
So, and you have started fielding a number of calls about potential other development going in that
Yes,
area?
we definitely have interest in the area. We'd love to see the, corner redeveloped holistically. And even though the properties on the south side of 63rd are no longer included in the TIF, we're still getting interest in those properties too, so. Larry, anything to add? Okay.
And I know that the staff and myself are trying any way we can to see if we can relocate or encourage those three to be relocated. And I think I was encouraged to find out that the bus company does not own that property, because I think the owner of that property may be very valuable down the road. Maybe be selling it.
And Eagle Creek has been sold.
Yes, Eagle Creek, and
So
they're doing.
that's going to
Yep.
start looking a lot better.
Yeah.
Well, anything else, Jill, Larry, that you'd like us to talk about? I think, address? Steve? The two boards. Steve's just, Steve.
I've got one comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Up on Ogden where the vet was, that was an area for possible consolidation of properties. It wasn't real clear or clearly enunciated during any part of the process. I think it was perhaps a sentence in Jill's write-up, and that was it. But maybe the village wants to look at areas that are underdeveloped, that a single use on a 50 or 60-foot wide strip may not be the most beneficial when the goal is really to consolidate several parcels and get a larger development. It's not a hard and fast rule, but maybe, I don't know who would be involved in that, but maybe we draw some lines in different areas of the village around blocks of property and say, these have been identified as possible areas for consolidation and larger development, just so everyone's aware of it. So again, it'd be a recommendation only, wouldn't stop a petitioner from coming in and seeking a small-scale development. I just throw that out there as an option.
Yeah, but John, when you're talking a bunch of different parcels under private ownership, you can say, yeah, we want to consolidate this, but if they don't want to consolidate it, it's not going to happen.
But an example of that is Walgreens. I mean, look how many lots were assembled over a couple of years. Walgreens was working on that. Standard Market, same thing. And those people, a lot of those people didn't want to sell, but, I'll say it again, if there's enough money, they'll sell. They're going to sell.
And the reason I raise that is, does the village want to be patient in some areas and wait for that larger development, or kind of kill off that whole idea by approving, one small development in the middle of a possible area of consolidation? I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer, but maybe those areas can at least be identified, and a petitioner can be informed, and, the various bodies can be informed also.
Which is, I think, an idea of what we have for Porsche up on Ogden Avenue, is who has a parking problem employee-wise, not enough cars. He's already told us he has to expand because he needs to have more cars on that. With that, eventually, if he ties up the property at the motel, and then eventually gets Elite Repeat when it does become available, the sales tax out of that property alone would be unbelievable compared to the additional sales tax that would be gotten at Pet Supplies
And I think it
Plus.
would be in our best interest to promote that and work with Porsche on that, so that he doesn't go down the street to Downers Grove or Lyle or goodness knows where.
Now Larry's jumped in.
Now you got his attention. Now you got his
Larry's been doing a lot of work with
Would we be able to vacate part of that street and turn the south end of that street into a cul-de-sac and give Porsche
That's under consideration. I think staff's been looking at it.
Okay, I think that'd be a great idea.
There has been an awful lot of working with our car dealers, and this is not meant to be a play on words, but they truly are the economic engine of Ogden Avenue and a good part of our community. We basically have 5 car dealers right now that are looking to expand, and if we're unable to help them in the next, I would say, 36 to 60 months, they may look for another location. One of those car owners owns property in Hinsdale and has an option B to move there if they can't expand here. So I do like your idea, John, of taking a look at parcels along Ogden Avenue and kind of identifying opportunities to merge parcels together and where maybe service businesses may fit best because there's not a development opportunity because it's landlocked or whatever the reason might be. That allow us to have those conversations with potential developers or buyers and at least give them an idea of what we see the vision to be for that property. But we do have a lot of opportunities along Ogden Avenue, and the car dealers are looking at those properties, and to the elite repeat position, yes, they're going to be there as long as they enjoy running that business. But I do know that since that proposal was put together and presented to the village board, an offer has been made for that motel property by a car dealer. So there is definitely strong interest in that, so.
And I know, Larry, that we've talked, and I think the idea has been kind of laughable a little bit, but I keep throwing it out there about the potential of a village-owned parking deck. Now, when I think parking deck, to your point, Ed, about downtown, the best move for the village and all the residents is really a parking deck where we could provide more cars to be sold. I mean, that really would provide us long-term, whether we rented it back or made them some type of deal. To me, I think, and we've talked about the Alpha Motors that has a flooding issue. If we were to go up there and have the Auto Mile work together and have basically a new car storage facility, I don't think it's as far-fetched as sometimes it's left off,
Well, we have had some discussions talking about kicking around ideas along that line. We've been meeting with the car dealers. Toyota was very open in saying they feel they've lost some business to their Toyota dealership competition in Naperville, because when they expanded that dealership, the number of units that they have in inventory is greatly expanded. So human nature being the way it is, if I can buy that car today because it's the exact color I want, I'm going to go there, even though I might have bought it over here in Westmont. Our competition for Toyota to the west, Continental, on LaGrange Road, did the exact same thing. If you remember, their former footprint there was much smaller comparable to the one here in Westmont. If you look at their new footprint, it's 3 times larger. So they are going to need some type of help in inventory and managing inventory, and we have done that in the past in working with Mercedes-Benz or AutoNation and helping them not financially but in assisting them in getting that built. And that was a great asset to them. But we do have 5 car dealers, which are an important part of our business community, looking for ways to stay here in town, and it's going to be up to us as a community to find ways to make that happen. So, thank you.
Every dealer we talked to, Larry, said they need more room.
Everyone?
Yes.
Every dealer we talked to.
Every single one? All of them?
And you hit the nail on the head. These
It's a
guys
time
are.
bomb.
It is a time bomb,
It's a time bomb.
because they will go to another community just because the competition, if they don't have the cars, Rohrman's got half the cars of his competition. People aren't ordering cars. That was the future that we're told. It's going to be coming in and buying a car that day.
Yep.
Not ordering it, not waiting to get it a month. It's buying it that day. And if they can't find it today here, they'll find it somewhere else.
Instant gratification, that's it.
Instant gratification, exactly. So our future depends, this community's future depends on us coming up with Plan B or a Plan A for storage of these cars so these guys stay here.
Correct. Now, with that being said, we are a preferred destination for car dealers. We have other car dealers that are knocking on our door that would like to move to Westmont. We have the other Chevy building that is now under contract, and someone is looking to move in there very shortly. So many communities in the area have had open and standing dealerships that, closed dealerships, and not been able to move those buildings, where we're getting still inquiries on spaces we do have open. So we're very ideally situated.
In the past 2 or 3 weeks, we've sat down with 2 new dealerships looking to come into town.
Right. Existing dealers that are in business elsewhere.
That want to get on the Westmont Mile.
Great.
So,
Harold, I don't think your idea is far-fetched. I'm
Not
just
at all.
I'm just afraid the Park District's gonna steal it and put it on the Everpure property. No, I really think that's a good idea.
We'll have a workshop on
Yeah,
it with the
workshop,
Park District Board. We'll make sure.
I
There are
know,
dealerships downtown Chicago that are exactly that model, where they are what looks to be a high-rise
They've got windows
building,
and it looks.
and underneath, on the first 2 levels, is the showroom and service, and above that are parking lots, and it looks like an office building.
Yeah.
even Ty, one of Ty's building is leasing out the inside space. I think the one south of Ty South, to outside of the community. He's got about 40 or 50 of his cars in there, ready to have his porter run down and get it and bring it to his showroom.
From
Two of the
outside
things-
the community?
Yes, yeah, but maybe they might want to come inside the community, but,
Be a zoning concern.
You make them get a sticker on
Anyhow, discussion for another time.
okay. And we've got a repeat that would be great to sell, and then we also got the all ties buildings that at some point we're hoping that become available, because I think that's the area that you could look at, a car storage, a block off of Ogden that Harold's talking about, so. Any other items I promise we'll be done by 11, so, look at everybody look at the, any other items you'd like to discuss? I do have to say, and the planning and zoning, I'm very appreciative of the years of experience that you guys have provided, the amount of work you do. I'm impressed by your homework that every time I've watched it, you can tell you're very prepared, you take it serious, and I know I appreciate the work that you do. And again, this workshop was meant just to air our concerns. I mean, and it just so happened, as Jim said, that we had the hospital right before us that gave us some fuel to discuss.
Some
So,
better to talk about. Yeah.
Again, I thank you, and I think it was very beneficial for me, and I'm sure for everybody else, to have this discussion. And again, we'll probably agree to disagree down the road again, but at least we had an opportunity to talk a little bit. So I would entertain a motion for the village board portion of this for,
Actually, we're not going to adjourn.
we're not going to adjourn, we go, motion to go to executive session.
We do it tonight and
Put my
then
glasses on so I read this.
we can all go enjoy the
We would go to motion by the village board to go in executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel.
So move, Scott.
Second, Seneca.
Motion made and second to adjourn the executive session. Roll call, please.
Trustee Scott?
Yes.
Trustee Addington?
Yes.
Trustee Seneca?
Yes.
Trustee Barker?
Yes.
Trustee Barry?
Yes.
Trustee Nero?
Yes.
And since the village board portion of this is going to be adjourning into executive session, planning and zoning, you can continue to meet or you can adjourn your meeting.
Motion to adjourn to planning and zoning.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Thomas, seconded by Commissioner Van Buren. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Okay, thank you, everybody.